everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Way the World Works. We are continuing with our Thanksgiving theme today with this episode. So we're going to do a fun little history lesson, and then I will tell you about some great Black Friday deals going on right now with the Tuttle Twins products that you will not want to miss out on. So let's get to it. All right, so we all know the story of Thanksgiving. We know the Pilgrims, and we know the Native Americans coming together and helping each other. But let's talk about it a little more. Let's talk about somebody named Squanto. And, I've talked about a lot that I get to learn so much when I do the research for these episodes. And I got to learn some new things I didn't know about Squanto before. So we obviously know that a long time ago, these two groups of people met who didn't speak the same language and didn't share the same customs and traditions. And, they didn't know if they could trust each other. And that makes perfect sense because you don't even know what each other are saying. You don't know, especially, for the Native Americans, they don't know if the Pilgrims are there to be hostile to them. And, same with the Pilgrims. They don't know if the Indians are going to say, get out of here. This is where we have lived forever. But one man really helped change everything. And he helped turn strangers into neighbors. And his name was Squanto. So you may have heard about him. So Squanto actually ties into the story of Pocahontas, if you guys are familiar with that, because I believe he was taken back to England by John Smith, the same John Smith from the story. We'll get into that a little bit later, but let's talk about it. Pilgrims had a very long voyage on the Mayflower, as we know. And we think about it now as, you come over and I guess we think of like ships as almost like cruise ships because that's what we have today, or that's what we see today. But coming to America from England on a boat was nothing glamorous. People were dying. If somebody got sick, you were in such close quarters that the whole ship or a lot of the ship would get sick. There was a scurvy happened a lot, and that there were all these things that could go wrong. I mean, then of course you have to think about if there's bad weather, if there's a storm, your boat can be completely lost at sea. So there are a lot of real dangers, but they took that risk. So they have had a time, right? The Pilgrims have not been living it up. So they get to this new land, which, by the way, they thought they didn't think it was supposed to be Virginia. They were sailing to Virginia. That is where they had their charter with the king. A charter is basically the king saying, I give you permission to go on this land, and these rules apply, but it has to be on this land. But they ended up in Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts. So oops, wrong place. So they did not know how to grow local crops. They don't know the terrain. They don't know this area. And so you have to remember that makes it very hard to find food. There were also, and we'll talk about this in another episode, socialism came into play here, where some socialist policies or practices that they were doing actually made them go hungry. Oh, shocking. Shocking that socialism would cause hunger. That's not something we already knew, right? And then, of course, the winters were brutal and they needed help. So let's get into this story. So along comes Squanto. And Squanto spoke two different languages. He spoke English and he spoke Wampanoag. I want to make sure I say that correctly because once you start saying it, it like rolls off the tongue in a weird way. Wampanoag. So that was the local Native American tribe's language. So he was able to translate between both of them. And through him, two very different groups of people were able to discover how important peaceful exchange was. And for the Pilgrims, it wasn't just important, it was the difference between surviving and not surviving. So very powerful lesson on how trade and voluntary cooperation can, and it does, make the world go round. So let's talk about Squanto and his backstory, because like all great historical figures, he's got an interesting one. So he actually belonged to a different tribe. He belonged to the Patuxet, I think is how you say it, forgive me if not, tribe. But years earlier, he had been taken to Europe, where a lot of times when this would happen, there would be a conversion process. So a lot of these Native Americans, the people who took them over, whether by force or voluntarily, a lot of time it was by force, but that's a different story. They would teach them religion. They would share their religion with them. And so Squanto becomes a Catholic, but through that, he actually learns English. So he is in a really interesting position where he's able to speak both these languages. But later he actually asks to be returned home, and he is able to do that. So he goes back. But the sad thing is he finds his village completely wiped out because his tribe had gotten some sort of illness that spread far and wide, and all his family, all his friends, they're all gone. So you have to remember how just really sad that is for him. But he joins up with the Wampanoag tribe, and they let him into their community. And so he's able to at least find a new home there. All right. So pilgrims arrive in Plymouth Rock, which, by the way, fun fact, when I think of Plymouth Rock, and I think what a lot of people do, I think they think of like a rock, like a cliff. Like there was this giant cliff. Pilgrims arrived there and oh, this is Plymouth Rock. Well, if you go, maybe some of you have, to see Plymouth Rock, it's like a stone. You guys, it's a rock. It's like a tiny rock. And I almost wish I didn't see the video going around Instagram or TikTok, because in my head it was this big romantic thing. And I'm like, wait, it's like roped off and it's like a rock you can probably at least, 2 people max could pick up. So it's kind of interesting. But so they land Plymouth Rock 1620, and they are scared and they are starving. They have just been through kind of a horrific journey, and Squanto could have ignored them. He could have resented them, in fact, because there is definitely good reason to be worried about people coming into your land. Instead, he helped them. He showed them how to plant corn and using fish for fertilizer and where to catch eels. I wouldn't want to eat an eel, but you know what? Desperate times call for desperate measures, I guess. And how to trade with nearby tribes. And as we know, trade makes the world go round. That's probably one of the most important things. So he becomes a bridge between these two worlds. And he didn't do it because he was forced to do it. Nobody forced him and said, you must be a translator for these people. The pilgrims didn't use force saying, you must do this and help us either. He chose to help. He chose to help. And remember, choice, this is the most important element of a free society, because if you don't have choice, you have literally nothing. You don't have freedom. So he chose to help. And that's voluntary cooperation, and people working together on both sides are going to see a benefit of that. And that's what makes people want to voluntarily help each other. We talk about this in the golden rule, that you want to treat people how you would like to be treated. And I think that was something in the back of Squanto's mind. He's probably thinking, how would I feel if I were the pilgrims coming into this new land, having no experience, being on the verge of starvation? I'd probably want them to help. And, it might have helped that he was, Christianity was a big part of his life. And so that was, a principle of that, a precept of that was helping other people and the golden rule. And so maybe that was part of the reason he helped. Either way, he chose to help. And that's what we really want to hone in on, as we all know about trade is, we have been trained in our society to think that incentives or profit motive or getting something out of something is somehow bad or somehow selfish. But trade is at its core a win-win situation. I have something that you want that you don't have access to. I have something that you want that you don't have access to. Therefore, when we trade, we create value for each other, and it is a win-win. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is absolutely okay. As long as you're being honest and you're fulfilling and doing everything you promise to do, as long as you're not saying something is one thing and then, ripping someone off at the end of the day, it's okay to have a win-win experience. So what did the pilgrims have to offer? They're brand new on this new land. Well, remember, they're coming from Europe where they had these, metal tools and different goods that they didn't have in Plymouth Rock or in that area in Massachusetts. So that is very appealing to these tribes. And so the tribes, on the other hand, they had food, they had furs to keep them warm, they had local knowledge, which is above and beyond probably one of the best things. So the Wampanoag tribes are able to give all that to the pilgrims in exchange for some of their European goods. And so by trading, both sides got something out of it. So that's, a key thing about trade, that you both benefit, and that is okay. It's a win-win. You can't really get any better than that. That's, and when we talk about the Pilgrims having these European goods and the Native Americans having this local knowledge in the fur, they each had what we call comparative advantages. They each had something the other person didn't, an advantage over the other person that did not make them better than the other person. It didn't make them worse than the other person. It actually was the perfect formula for trade, the perfect formula to come together and give each other what both of them needed. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, let's think of it this way. If your friend is baking cookies and you're really awesome at making lemonade, it makes sense to trade, right? Cookies for lemonade. You both get a treat. And you guys know that I love sugar, so I would love that. But nobody loses, you both smile. That is honestly, like summed up, that is exactly what was going on with the Native Americans and the Pilgrims. But it goes further than just this, trading of goods, win-win. It also promotes peace, this cooperation, this builds trust. And remember, both sides had reasons to not trust the other side, but they were able to, make a peace treaty that was all possible because of Squanto. Remember, he's brokering this deal because he is the translator going back and forth. And, both sides had to have a lot of trust for Squanto because they don't know if he's translating correctly. And so there's really three parties here that are all working together to live peacefully and trade and benefit from each other. So this was a huge part of building trust because trade does build trust. I talked about this in our episode about the Thanksgiving table and spontaneous order, that when we trade with other people, we're not just benefiting, we're also creating peace. It's creating trust. It's creating peaceful nations and peaceful relationships with other people. And that peace treaty they made lasted more than 50 years. And that's pretty amazing when you think about how different the worlds were between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. 50 years, not as long as we would hope, but it's pretty long considering. So, cooperation doesn't mean we all have to be the same. It doesn't mean we even have to agree on the same issues. We don't have to. It means we find common ground where we can. And sometimes, let's say that I don't agree with you on, well, in this case, in religion, the Native Americans were not Christians, and a lot of the Pilgrims, actually not all of the Pilgrims, but a lot of the Pilgrims were. We'll get into that in a different episode about the Mayflower Compact. But, a lot of the Pilgrims were. And so this is a fundamental difference. Religion has led to wars throughout history of people who didn't agree, but they found common ground. And that common ground was commerce. It was trade. It was, I don't know how to plant corn, but I have this, shovel that you can have that you don't have. Let's trade. And so that is amazing. And together they survived because of this. And we do this every day when you buy a snack, when you borrow a book, when you help a friend with homework and they help you, maybe you're good at math and they're good at science, and you kind of do a peaceful trade of swapping. And let's remember, this was like bartering. Obviously, they were trading goods for goods, but money is a substitution for a good. It is still a symbolic representation. It's still trade. So even if you're just trading money for a book, that is still the same glorious exchange as it was for the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. And we've each experienced that. We've traded toys, snacks, services, mowing lawn, homework, whatever it was. We've all done that. So think about a time that you've done that and how both parties benefited. I mean, there are examples everywhere of that. So there's a lot of good lessons here. Again, comparative advantage, that we all have different skills that can be used to help each other. Voluntary trade, keyword being voluntary. That is the choice. You do not have to do it, but you choose to do it. And, peaceful cooperation, where when we trade, it helps us build friendships. And I say this quote a lot, and I'm going to say it again. The French economist Frédéric Bastiat said that when goods don't cross borders, armies, soldiers will. So that is, true, that when we trade, we have friendships that prevent us from going to war with each other or, becoming violent. So really important lesson. So let's just remember that Squanto didn't just teach the Pilgrims how to grow corn. He taught them something even bigger. He taught them how people who are different can come together for everyone's good when they have these comparative advantages, when there's something to trade, and they can do it out of the goodness of wanting to have something for themselves, right? It's not always like, oh, just I am benevolent, I want to give you this. There are interactions, there are exchanges that benefit both parties, and benefiting people benefiting yourself, I should say, mutual benefit, that's okay. You're allowed to feel that way. So don't let anyone tell you that's not okay. So now that we're wrapping up that, I want to tell you about our exciting Black Friday sale. The full launch of our Black Friday sale starts on November 21st. But if you sign up for VIP access before the 20th, and we will put a link at the bottom here, then you will get early access to the sale. So please jump on that. And if you're interested in that, you can go to www.TuddleTwins.com/Black Friday. And again, we'll put that link on the bottom so you don't have to memorize it. But you guys, this is such a great opportunity because remember, we are going through a lot of the content of the Tuttle Twins books, but we're only scraping the surface. There is so much more, and there's so many more products. It's not just the books we talk about here. So you're not going to want to miss this for your family. So let me tell you about a little bit of the deal. So you can get the family starter pack for $179, which is 72% off. That is crazy. You're going to get 14 children's books. A lot of those we talk about on here, like the Miraculous Pencil. You're going to get workbooks. You're going to get audiobooks. You're going to get parent guides, and you're going to get free shipping. Amazing. Who doesn't love free shipping? But there's also another deal. You can get the Black Friday mega bundles for $275, which is 75% off the original cost. So that, again, amazing. And that's going to get you everything the family starter pack is going to get you, but you're going to also get Tuttle Rebuttals, 5 Choose Your Own Consequence books, which is like, parents, if you remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books we loved as kids, those are just like that, but with great lessons that you guys can all learn as a family. And you're also going to get 7 guidebooks, the American history books, which I use for so many of these episodes because it's so great. It's telling history, but through stories, which is, I'm a big fan of. That's how we all learn. So you're going to get those. You're going to get curriculum. You're going to get the audiobooks video, all the good stuff, and you're going to get free shipping. So you guys do not sleep on this deal. It is amazing. So if you sign up for VIP access before the 20th, you're going to get early access to that. And if you forget, no worries, because it's going to start for everybody on the 21st. So head over to, of course, www.TuddleTwins.com/Black Friday to jump on those deals. We will wrap it up there. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, guys, I will talk to you later.